Hi there, and welcome to the Racing Brain, where I talk about everything motorsport, from F1 to maybe a little bit of MotoGP, Formula E, and maybe even IndyCar. So, yeah, basically, I'm a big time fan of Formula One since 2010, and I've been following the sport since then, with my favorite driver being Sebastian Vettel. And obviously, he's retired now, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have followed his career from Red Bull Racing to Ferrari and then to Aston Martin, because following him really allowed me to follow the sport and to really like broaden my horizons and perspective from just a casual Vettel fan and then to eventually become an actual F1 fan. So even though he's retired now and doesn't seem like he's coming back to the sport, maybe he might come back sometime in the future. I'm hoping so, but doesn't look like it. But either way, I'm so grateful that even with him retiring, I'm able to enjoy F1 and just from a more neutral perspective, and to be able to sort of like follow different drivers, maybe become fans of them as well, and just following them a bit more closely than others. And so, yeah, this YouTube channel really is just about me talking about F1, more so from the perspective of driver mentality, driver mindset, and psychology, but in a more casual setting. So, of course, I am not a psychologist by any means, and I'm not even really a professional when it comes to anything motorsport. I'm just a super fan when it comes to F1 since 2010. Well, I don't know. Some people might not call me a super fan. Some people might. Doesn't matter. But I consider myself a super fan, and yeah, this is just a channel where I just like to talk about F1 drivers or MotoGP riders, or basically the athletes themselves, more so in that respect. And I want to talk about them in a way that is not like I'm informing you of anything or I am telling you anything. Basically, I just wanted to share my perspective, my opinions, my thoughts, and I wanted to be in such a way that it's just not me talking about it and then you just listening and that's it. Because I would like for this channel to basically be more of like an continuous open dialogue, open conversation, where even in this video, as I'm about to share what I will share in terms of the main topic, but I hope that you will actually leave comments, basically sharing your own perspective, your own thoughts, and everything as well in regards to, racing drivers from F1 to MotoGP or anything. And because I am a fan, but obviously I will miss out on potentially some facts or some information that might not be fully accurate. I might not always be correct in what I share in terms of facts, and you may have perspectives and whatnot that may actually make me consider changing my own perspective too. So that, which is why it's so important that we don't, how to say, share things from a closed mindset, but more from an open, curious perspective, so that we can grow as humans, grow as fans of the sport itself. And so, yeah, I would really appreciate if you can leave your comments, your thoughts, and everything at the end of this video once you have watched the entirety of it, or even if not, if you feel like you just wanted to share something from this point onwards or at any point, go ahead, because I want to learn from all of you as well. I want to know more from all of you as well, not only just to broaden my own perspectives and so forth, but to just keep the good conversation going from one fan to another. And obviously, the only thing I ask is that we leave comments, we share our thoughts in a considerate manner, in a considerate, objective, and in-depth manner. I'm not a fan of basically like being pigeonholed into one category and then wanting to attack other folks for having different perspectives and opinions and so forth. So that's just not the way I like to go about it. So yeah, thank you for listening to this very long introduction of this YouTube channel, because this is the first video. So I just wanted to give some information about what the videos moving forward will sort of be like. So it'll just be me mostly talking about F1 drivers, MotoGP riders, or anything. It will mostly be in F1, but I might venture off into other sports from time to time as well, because I just want to talk about our favorite athletes or the athletes that we follow in the sport. So yeah, without further ado, let's start this first video. So the video that I want to cover in terms of the topic right here is basically about our three primary title contenders for the 2025 season, which has already happened because it's now 2026. Yeah, so I just want to talk more about, you know, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, and Oscar Piastri, because obviously these three have given us so much to watch and enjoy up until the very last race in Abu Dhabi. And I have to say, even though in my mind it's not quite a classic when it comes to F1 seasons, you know, there are more exciting seasons that we have witnessed and watched, but it was so interesting and so exciting for me in terms of the driver psychology side, because the three of them have approached this in such different ways, different approaches when it comes to their racecraft, their mind games and everything, and where they started from, and then how they developed throughout the season and where they ended up at. So I just want to touch a bit more on this, and yeah, just more on our three protagonists, and basically how I find the three of them have approached the season and how I enjoy them in different ways, because I am not a fan of any of them in a sense that, you know, I would consider myself a Vettel fan, but right now I don't really have much of a driver that I'm very fixated on. Maybe a bit of Carlos Sainz in there, Nico Hülkenberg as well, but for the most part, I think I consider myself now more of a neutral fan. I just like to watch the sport for what it is, and you know, at times I might gravitate towards one driver, and then at times I might gravitate towards another. So, but I think that's just so much fun and so forth. And I just want to talk about the three protagonists, and I will start, I guess, with our current drivers champion, Lando Norris. Now, with Lando, I find him to be such an interesting driver because I actually find him to be quite similar when it comes to the trajectory of how his championship season started off, went on, and finished. I actually find him to be quite similar to Sebastian Vettel when it comes to the pace of his qualifying speed. I find him to be like, for the most part, when he's on it, it reminds me so much of Sebastian as well. When it like gets his pole position, it's such fine margins, or it would be done in such a way that's like, wow, I cannot believe he has just done that. And when it comes to Lando Norris, I just find it that aside from his qualifying speed, I also find that his racecraft to be also quite similar to Sebastian as well. Not the best when it comes to being the sharpest overtaker or the best defender or anything, because I find that probably like Max and Oscar are significantly ahead of him when it comes to that, just by watching the 2025 season and even before that as well. I just find that he may not be the strongest when it comes to being an outright racer in that respect, which is also very similar to Sebastian, because Sebastian is not also the sharpest racer. Even as a fan speaking, whenever I watch him make an overtake, I would sometimes wince a little bit and be like, is he gonna make that stick? Or, and then, because there's always a 50-50 chance with Sebastian when he makes a move, it works out nicely, or it could work out not so nicely in that regard. And that's how I always find it with Lando as well. He gives me that similar feeling when he makes a move. I'm always like on the edge of my seat. I'm like, is it gonna stick? I have no idea. So from his overtakes, that even when he's defending against Oscar in the Austrian Grand Prix, I'm constantly at the edge of my seat because I don't know, because I think Oscar may have the edge, but I think, yeah, that's where I find like with Lando, it just reminds me so much of Sebastian. So very quick when it comes to his pace. Qualifying is just so awesome, and then when it comes to his racecraft, it's like not the best, but I'm thankful that when I watch him, I always get entertained. I'm always engaged because I don't know how is it going to turn out. Will it work? Will it not work? But I'm such a fan of it. And so yeah, when it comes to racecraft, my gosh. But I think the main thing about Lando that I'm so fascinated by, and actually I'm so appreciative of him when it comes to that regard, is how open he is when it comes to him admitting his mistakes, his flaws, and how he's also quite, he doesn't come across like a lot of his answers are very scripted or rehearsed, or he's trying to put on a face. He tends to just be himself, which I suppose we are not always used to, because even in the 2010s when I started watching the sport, and while most drivers, when they give their answers in the press and everything, they always tend to be mostly, you can tell that they have rehearsed it or they have thought about it and they've given a filtered response for the most part. Sometimes you will find that they're quite candid as well, like candid in a way that you and I can be in a real life situation with our friends, our family members, and so forth. But I find that Orlando, the way he answers things or the way he approaches things, it's so much so that you don't get the sense that he's listened to his PR rep that much, and he just answers things the way they are, which, to be fair, I guess will have mixed responses. So there will be folks who appreciate that because it just feels refreshing that the answers he's giving doesn't feel like what most other drivers would give as well. But on the other hand, it can also come across in a way that's open to criticisms as well, which also is fair because, when you go about it a little bit differently, the results and the response from others would also be quite different. And it's not the norm in that sense. But I appreciate it because he reminds me also of Sebastian when it comes to Sebastian in not so much at the early part of his career, but the midpoint and the end point of his career, where he's becoming more open about things and more willing to share things in a certain perspective, especially during Sebastian's Ferrari days and Aston Martin days. Well, in terms of Ferrari days, maybe more towards the mid and end point of it. And with Lando, I find that he's giving me those vibes as well. So it's interesting. He's giving me vibes of Sebastian in terms of his talent when it comes to the speed, the not the best racecraft, but kind of making me at the edge of my seat, and also when it comes to the perspective and the way he's willingly sharing stuff, like in terms of the mental health aspect and so forth. So that's why I appreciate in Lando, because it's not often that's talked about in such a way, and he's, I guess, bringing it a little bit more to the forefront. But again, I could be mistaken. Let me know in the comments if you find that he doesn't bring that vibe so much, or he's not really bringing that across as much. But at least from my perspective, from how I'm viewing things, it feels like that. And so that's how I find Lando to be. So he's a very interesting character. I appreciate how he approaches things. Obviously, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get that, which is fair enough. But I do find him to be a very interesting character. And I do find him to be a worthy champion of the 2025 season, even though I do find that Max has driven a better season than him. But all things considered, Lando did what he needed to do, and he was able to pull it off, execute it nicely to get his first world championship, which is no small feat, especially against Max and Oscar. And on that note, let's move on to the next driver I'm going to talk about, which is Max Verstappen. And Max, interestingly as well, when we are comparing to previous drivers, like with Lando, how I'm comparing him to Sebastian, with Max, I'm actually comparing him more to Fernando as well, especially in the year 2010 up until 2012, 2013, with how Sebastian and Fernando were constantly like competing against each other in the World Championship. I find Max to be similar to Fernando in the sense that he's always outperforming his car. You know that when Max is there, you know that he will always be giving it 100% or 110% if that even makes sense, and always just extracting it in ways that even his teammate is not able to. Now, obviously, some folks might dispute and say that, well, the Red Bull team is sort of centered around Max, so the car might be more suited to him, which could be the case, but even so, for him to be able to pull it off and to make the moves that he makes, and to approach racing, to approach the press, to approach things with such a robust mindset, You really cannot get into his skin, well, except for Spain last season. That's the only time. But aside from that, he's really been rock solid, and I find him to be similar to Fernando. Well, Fernando perhaps will maybe play mind games a little bit more, and I find Max doesn't do that as much. But when it comes to just outperforming the car and whatnot, he does remind me a lot of Fernando, because Fernando, during his Ferrari days, had to really dig deep and extract a lot out of the car that he was given, and to be able to bring it so close to like being able to potentially claim the world championship twice for Fernando in his Ferrari days. And with Max, yeah, last season he was just so on it, and even to the last race, even though McLaren kind of made it difficult for themselves by prioritizing both drivers and allowing Max to just get so close to it, just shows how much he's able to optimize every single race that he's been given. And I find that to be so impressive. And obviously, when it comes to his racecraft, again, very mixed figure. Some folks and like him and how he's so very much on the limit when it comes to not only his racecraft, but when it comes to interpreting the rule book and what you're allowed or not allowed to do. And I always find that Max is able to somehow like get towards the very fine limits of it. Like any further beyond that, he'll get penalized very easily and whatnot. But I think, and maybe in his early career, that's what was the case. That's why he got so much penalties and so forth. But especially like the last few years, ever since he became a world champion and so forth, I just find that he was so on it, very clinical in his moves, that it's like, even though it feels controversial, but it's still within the limits of the rule book, that he's able to pull it off. And obviously that's where quite a number of folks are not a fan of him, because it can feel at times very unsporting and feel very unethical, or doesn't feel fair in that sense, because not a lot of drivers will approach racing like that, but he does, and he will approach it to that very limit. And I find that too. Sometimes I'm rooting for him, sometimes it's the opposite. But I guess that's with Max, because some moments it's like so impressive, some moments it's like, why did you do that? But I guess that's what he is. It's like, love him or hate him, he is what it is, and he's very impressive. Combined with his qualifying pace, race pace, his racecraft, it's just so on it. And I tell you, in such a level that's why I guess why he is the driver of the season for probably the majority when it comes to 2025. And who could fault him for that? Even though he's not been the cleanest driver, I guess, when it comes to driver perspective, people perceiving him as a driver in that season and so forth. Fair enough, but I find Max to be very, very interesting in that regard. Now, moving on to Oscar. Now, with Oscar, he started off, at least in the first half of the season, I find him to be very much like very calm, very clinical as well. Almost like Max, but a lot less controversial, a lot less on the limit when it comes to the interpreting the rule book. But he's very precise. Like, his overtakes and his defenses, when he has to do them, are very clean, and usually he prevails them. He wins his defenses, he wins his overtakes and everything. And that's where I find him to be very fascinating as well. But when it comes to wheel-to-wheel battles as well, he's so on it. Like, whenever Oscar and Max are battling each other so closely, I always find it to be like, wow, who's gonna win? I have no idea. But I think, yeah, Oscar has won over Max quite a number of times too, in ways that when I felt that if it was Lando, it's not always a given that he might prevail over Max. But with Oscar, he's more likely to, because I think he's very precise, and also his approach to racing, so calm, so clinical, and he's just approaching things even off track as well in a really good way, at least in the first half. Then obviously in the second half, after Zandvoort in the Netherlands, I guess because it's his first title campaign, and obviously when it's always your first title campaign, anything can happen. Even though you are as prepared as you can be, things can happen that might unravel. And I do not blame Oscar for that, 'cause I still find him to be a very calm and clinical driver as a whole. But I think because it's his first title campaign compared to Lando, which is his second, and for Max, he's done this many times now. With Oscar, there's a lot of unknowns to approach, especially when there are the low points like Baku in Azerbaijan, and then in Brazil as well, or even in Mexico, and all these different races in the second half where he's not been as on it in terms of pace, in terms of consistency, in terms of approach, and you could tell that he is somewhat affected by it, but not in a way that is so overwhelmingly that he's not able to recover from it. He was able to when it came to Qatar and then Abu Dhabi, though unfortunately at that point it was the last two races of the season, so there wasn't enough time for him to recover appropriately and mount a proper challenge to potentially cause an upset. Yeah, a little too late, but I find Oscar to be so interesting because I just love all three drivers. But yeah, with Oscar, he has the potential to really be the proper antithesis of Max Verstappen. Yeah, because Max is, now I don't want to compare these drivers too quickly to like past greats and whatnot, like Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, because every era, every decade is very unique, and they all have their circumstances, they all have their rules, the car characteristics and the seasons and just the climate and everything. It's so different. But if I were to compare like Verstappen and Piastri, the dynamic and the potential rivalry that might escalate in the future and whatnot, I think it could become something like a Senna and Prost, but not in a level that they might explode off track. More so on track. I'd say more in an on track perspective. Off track maybe, but I don't think so. I feel like modern drivers these days are less likely to be so affected by each other in that way. Maybe in the past, yes, but now I think because it's been so many decades in F1, and I think drivers over time are more prepared and are able to handle these things a bit more better and learn from the past as well. So I find that in terms of on track, I find they could be the modern Prost and Senna. So PS3 like Prost and Verstappen like Senna in that sense. And then obviously that leaves Norris a little bit out of that conversation. But I think Norris can also be part of that mix as well, depending on how his 2026 season goes. Because I find Lando to be more like Sebastian in that way. And his pace is really much there. Maybe his racecraft and his approach to racing isn't as rock solid as I find it compared to the other two. But again, he's already won his first world championship. He may have already transformed so dramatically. And the only way to know is to watch the 2026 season. So yeah, and on that note, I think that's about it when it comes to this first video. Now, I have no idea how this video has turned out. I don't know whether all of you watching this have found great value in just listening to my perspective and my thoughts and everything. Yeah, obviously compared to many others on YouTube who are talking about F1 in various ways, maybe their stuff is way more in-depth, maybe more well-researched and stuff, which to be fair, they do a lot more in that regard. For me, I'm approaching this more as this is a thought that's really in my head and I wanted to share it, and so I'm sharing it right now. So yeah, it's not coming in with a lot of research, so to say, more so just thoughts that I wanted to share, and hopefully by sharing them, maybe it will spark something in you as well. And feel free, please share them in the comment section, because I would like to learn about them as well and know more. And probably if let's say there's something I was not correct on, you can share them as well, and we learn from each other. I like to learn from you and broaden my horizons and open my perspectives when it comes to these things. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this first video, and if you like it, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well, so that you will be notified when there are more videos, and please leave those comments as well. Yeah, and hopefully you enjoy this and you will stay tuned and watch my next video and the ones that are to come. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to The Racing Brain. Bye.